Welcome to another chess tournament recap. In this video, we go over the Utah Amateur Chess Championship. I played in the under 1200 section. These games were 45-minute with a 5-second increment. And this is how I did. So in my first game, I played as black and my opponent went d4, and I kind of hate playing against d4. I always go up with the King's Indian defense setup, even though I'm not super familiar with the theory, something I really need to study up on. And he goes for the center attack. So once this e4 pawn comes here, you want to get this d6 pawn just in case you do have these trades in the middle. So I go there, he brings the bishop here, and I continue setting up in that King's Indian attack setup. He pushes here on h4, not really the biggest deal in the world, and I bring my knight to the middle. So from here, he gets the queen on this diagonal looking to go here, and I say, hey, I'm just gonna take this bishop because this bishop doesn't have a lot of places other than to go here. And because of that, I take the bishop there. I mean, he could have brought it down here, but he doesn't. We trade off the bishop. He's ruined his pawn structure. I think that's a pretty good trade overall. Engine agrees with me, I'm up a point. So I thrust into the center, looking to even potentially get these even worse. He responds by closing down the center, which I then bring this knight over here, looking to attack it, some sort of queenside attack going. He goes b2, and I go bishop to g4, and this was my first real mistake of the game. White can equalize by just taking this bishop. Once I get this knight out, there's not really much that my knight can do here, and so it's not the best move. What I should have done instead is, instead of going to bishop to g4, just getting my bishop over here to d7 and giving myself the flexibility to attack also on the king side and kind of shut down any advancement he has over here on the king side. Instead, he does take. I bring the knight out, and he pushes this pawn further at h5. I said that's not really that big of a deal, and I bring out the bishop over here to h6. I'm looking to target this pawn. He brings the rook over to defend it, and I bring this queen over, put even more pressure on, and then he defends it even further. So I push to a3. He gets the king out here, and I bring this queen back because I realize this attack here, it's stopped dead in its tracks. There's not really much I can do to really capitalize on it. So he then starts to march his pieces forward, and this is kind of where it feels like the game for me was falling apart, and I was on my heels just trying to unravel this position I'm in, and while I'm doing that, he's just slowly improving his. So I bring the bishop back, we just trade off these pawns. He gets these rooks over here on this diagonal, and I just push up here looking to possibly get my king up here and be fine. He brings the knight there, I trade off the knights, he gets the queen over, and I push here looking to try to get this fork here. He gets the queen there, preventing the fork, and I bring my queen here. Not the best move, because really, what is this queen gonna do? It can't go here, it can't go here. I'm gonna have to move it eventually. He goes to a3, looking to attack on the queen side, so I start pushing on the queen side, and now he's trying to infiltrate here. This is a great move to really rip open my queen side. So I play this rook move here to basically lock down all three of these. But he brings the rook over here. So if this knight moves at all, great, I'll just take this. But I didn't anticipate the knight coming back and looking at the rook here. So I bring the queen back, we trade off these rooks. My opponent then plays knight to b3 here. I'm guessing looking to kind of break open on the queen side. I don't think this is a great move because this knight's not getting a lot of action by going this way. I think it would have been better to really rip this up and get this pawn here. However, he doesn't see it, and so I throw this check here. King comes here, and I bring the queen here. So at this point, this is still happening, but he's not pushing it yet. And this is where kind of things equalize for me. I take the rook here, the pawn comes here, and I push over here to g5. Not exactly sure what I'm trying to do here. Knight comes back, he's trying to get back in the game. I push this pawn here, and he finally finds this queen to c8 move, looking to pick up this pawn, bring the king to h7, but he doesn't pick up the pawn right away. He goes knight to f1, looking to go here and defend this pawn. And I go queen to f6. Now this was the last shot that I had of really winning this game. What I should have done instead is queen to f6, just go g4, and f takes g4, queen takes e4, and I'm really got a great attack coming up on my side and converting to an endgame. Instead, that doesn't happen. And then what happens is he brings the knight here, protecting this pawn. I bring this back to protect this pawn, and he brings this king in the game. He's completely forgetting these pawns that he can gobble up. And I push, but it's a little too late. He brings the queens there. He forces the trade-off, and we're in a knight and bishop endgame. I'm down 2 pawns, now down a pawn. He checks me here, I go here, but then I lose the bishop. And so with that, I lose the game. We play a couple more moves, but at this point, I know it's over. And I lose the first game of the tournament with all hope dashed of winning the amateur championship in my division. So the next game, I have white. I play against this black. He's a 668 player. I'm feeling confident about winning this. And As white, I always play e4, and he goes into Sicilian. I just go knight at f3. Before this game, I saw my chess coach do a lesson on the Sicilian, and he went over this line. And I was like, I'll just follow kind of the tenets that he had on it. He brings the bishop there, and we're basically fighting for this d4 square in the middle. Green is a knight, and I move this bishop here to pin the knight to the king. He unpins it, and I just take the knight. Now this is an inaccuracy. What I should do instead is just lunge into d4 and play it from there. But instead I take, he takes back, and then I fortify my center position, not thinking too much of it. He brings knight to f6. I bring the queen out to protect this even further. He pushes here to e5, which I thought was an interesting strategy, going with a little stonewall pawn structure there. I just castle, and he brings this bishop out looking to castle himself. So from here, I play c4, looking to get my knight in the game, possibly get an outpost, and closing down the center for this bishop. He plays a6, and I get my knight out here on c3, just furthering develop. He brings b5 though, which I thought was very interesting, and I said, that's fine. I'll just replace this pawn. Not a big deal. He brings the rook to the center, and I bring my knight out here to h4, looking to get it over here to f5, thinking that's a great place for it to be, and he shuts that down with g6. Not a big deal. All I should be doing is pushing back to f3, which is what I do. We're still in a pretty even position at this point, and now he attacks at b4 at my knight. So what I do is I throw it in the center, we trade off the knights, and then I get this pawn here attacking this bishop. He pushes back, obviously, but I don't feel like I'm in that bad of a position. The engine agrees. We're gonna draw a state. I bring my bishop here to cut off this king. I think that's a great thing for me to do. I just need to get my queen on the back rank, or a rook there, and I win the game. He goes here to push this pawn forward, and I bring this rook over to provide a little support for if he does try to do that. He brings the bishop back to trade off, and I say, hey, cool, I'll just support this bishop. He takes, I take. If I can get this knight here, that's looking like a good checkmate. He takes, we go there, and then he pushes here to prevent the knight move here on g5. What he should have done instead is, instead of going there, he should have taken the pawn here. Everything would start to fall apart at that point. But he didn't, so what happens instead is, after going f6, I bring the rook over to now defend that pawn, and so that's no longer up for grabs. He's now pushing on a5, and I bring the queen back here. He then pushes to a4. That's fine. I'm going to bring the knight back, give myself some, options if he does take there. He brings this rook over here to f7. I'm guessing to push this f5 pawn forward, and I bring this knight over here to c4. 1, 2, if he does take, I just close this line, and I'm in a pretty position, but also have a threat on this pawn. He pushes to f5 like I thought. I just bring this pawn over here. If he takes, I still have my strong center, but he pushes forward and I bring the queen back. Not the biggest thing to happen. We trade these off. The knight's in a very strong outpost, and he wants to trade off the rook there. Now, it's not the best move, because what happens is I just take the rook, he takes the queen, and now that pawn that was protected by the queen is no longer protected, and I'm attacking this bishop. So he brings the queen over here to attack the knight and get the bishop. And so what I do is I just take this pawn here. Now I'm covering this knight, and now we're double attacking this bishop. So he's got to get the bishop out of the way. And I say, that's great. I'm going to maneuver this knight. Now I'm going to attack this pawn. He brings this rook over here. I get the queen out of the way, double attacking this pawn. And so things are looking pretty good for me at this point. So rook comes out. I just keep maneuvering my position around, and he throws a check. And that's where I block the queen, and I'm down to trade off at this point. He moves that away. I bring the rook over to now pin the bishop to the queen and to take that bishop. And the bishop decides to trade off. And he realizes he dropped the queen there. And from there, rook takes, I just throw a check there. I take the bishop, and I create this passed pawn, which could be a problem. He goes rook to a3, but I have a passed pawn of my own, which I'm pushing, and it's gonna be game over from there. He resigns, and I win the second game of this tournament. So far, it hasn't been my cleanest tournament. Not a big deal, but I'll manage. So from here, I'm going into my third game. I'm 1-1. I really need a win here if I want to have any shot at cracking into the top 3, getting a cash prize. And so I'm going up against the 779 here. I definitely have this one in the bag. He goes e4, and I go into my Caro-Kann prep. And he goes into kind of a weird version of the opening where I'm already have an advantage. I just take, and then he puts the queen there, which I thought was very weird, because I then just take pawn again. And then he gets his knight out. So he has a little bit more development, but I feel like my pawn structure is a little bit more solid. I pin that knight to the queen, and he brings the knight out. I just trade it off. And so his developmental lead's not as good. From there, I develop my knight, and he's bringing in a pretty kingside attack that I'm not really afraid of. So I just bring the pawn out to develop the bishop. I then go to say, hey, let's trade off these knights. He doesn't want to do that, and I throw this check here. I don't want this king to castle kingside, so I throw the check and get him out of castling situation, and I bring the bishop over here looking to castle myself. He then takes in the center, and I say, great, I'm gonna take here, have a good strong pawn structure, but also leave this nice little column to attack this king later on as he's moving that way. He brings the pawn over here to c4, and I bring the knight here. He takes, I take, and he takes with the queen. I then castle, and I'm completely safe from all the bad monsters around me. He then pushes this a3 move, which I thought was a weird waiting move. I think it was just, I don't even know what it was, but it's a huge advantage for me. I bring the rook out here to attack the queen. Queen comes back. I then centralize the rooks again, trying to just maximize the attack as much as possible. He brings the queen out, and I then bring the bishop out, one, to get this defender off this square, but two, to just kind of trade off. Not a big deal. He brings this bishop here to prevent that check, and I just trade off the bishop. So far, a pretty standard game, in my opinion. And so he takes with the king. I throw a check with the king. The king drops back, and I bring this queen over here looking to attack this bishop and cause a lot of mayhem. He brings the rook over to defend, and I push over here on h6 just to help with any back rank issues. Obviously, one of the better moves to do would be to get the knight involved anyways. And he starts pushing on the king side. Not a big deal. I get the queen out of the way because I just don't want any bishop shenanigans. He's starting to now push on the queen side with his pawns. I get my knight in the game, centralize that knight, and he brings this rook over. But it's not like this bishop has a lot going on for it. So I decide to take, and I realized after I took that I kind of screwed my whole position over. I still have an advantage, but the advantage I did have, I just threw away. So what I should have done instead of taking rook here, what I should have done was I should have gone b5 here. Attacking the queen, it's guarded by this knight. The queen has to get off the square. If he goes c3, which is the best move there, I just go rook to c8, and this queen has to get out here. Best move for him is to counterattack the queen, but brilliant move there. That's the best case scenario. Obviously, I didn't find that. We just traded down, and rook to e2. After everything simplifies, I try to pin this rook to the king here, and the king just moves out of the way. So not a crazy game there. The queen comes here looking to check, but I just trade off and go into a rook endgame. Now, I feel like I have a better chance of winning just because I have one pawn island instead of his two for these. I just have to make sure I don't blow the game with bad play. Now, we're under 1,000 rated play, and we're not taking our time. So these aren't the most accurate moves in the end game. I'm just trying my best to make sure I can get the pawns gobbled up, and he's not able to really stop any of my pawn advances. And I'm just taking a little bit more pawns than he does. And now I have my passed pawn. He can't defend this pawn, and I win the game. So I go into my last game, trying to crack into the top 3, win a cash prize. I'm going against this guy that I have seen play before, and I think he's actually pretty good. So I go e4, he goes e5, and we go into a Ruy Lopez, something that I'm very comfortable in. But however, I've never really seen the Janish Gambit is what it's called. And he said, oh, I hate the Ruy Lopez. I learned it specifically for this line, which when you're going into it and you don't know the line, that's not the best thing in the world to hear. So I take the knight because I don't know what to expect. I take the pawn there, and he brings this queen over here to d4, one looking to grab this pawn and cause some mayhem. And I throw this check completely forgetting that, you know, you can just put the pawn here. And so I take this pawn here, he takes there, and I trade off the queen, but I lose the knight, and I'm down 2 pawns. Now that I'm out of my prep, I'm making some serious mistakes. So I'm just trying to develop as quick as possible, kind of get myself castled. So I push over here on d4, looking to, one, if this bishop takes, I get the knight here and equalize this game. And if he was to push back, you push here, and he has to get off the diagonal or come over here to d6, which is what he does. I then attack this rook, he comes back over here, and I centralize my rooks. Nothing too crazy. He then pushes bishop to d2, and this is the chance that I have to really come back in this game. I push a g3, and we're equalized. Somehow, some way, I've equalized this game. He goes bishop to b7, looking to push here and defend this bishop. I say it's too late. I'm gonna grab the bishop, and apparently this is a missed win that brings it back to equality because there's a freaking hanging knight right here. Puts me at 8.5 because you're looking at one just gobbling up all of this. I'm in such a good position, and I miss it. So, I mean, I get my king, he gets the pawn. We're pretty similar to being equalized. He attacks there. I bring this bishop back. We're back on even pawn structures, completely drawn game at this point. And he throws my king in check, and I bring it back. He then goes knight to h4, which I thought was weird, so I went back to attack him. He goes there, and I bring my king here, which is an inaccuracy because of that move right there. And I block it with my pawn. So he brings the rook over here. I don't know why I made this move because it's not like I can double up my rooks right here, right? And he then checks my king. I drop back, and then dropping back, I completely forgot that that king was guarding that bishop. I then lost the bishop, and we played to an endgame, but he was always just a little, obviously a piece ahead, so he was able to convert it at the end. So I finished the tournament 2-2. Not my best outing. I wasn't super proud of how I played like I have in the recent tournaments. I was making a lot of blunders and not taking my time on the clock, so it really hurt me. So that's it for the Utah Amateur Championship. I'll be back next week with a chess recap. You can view that here, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.